snow started the moment we passed through Laramie. At first, it was just a few lazy flakes melting instantly when they hit the windshield. But by the time we started climbing the pass on Highway 130, it had turned into a storm. "Wyoming in November," Mark said, drumming his fingers on the dash. "Always a lottery." I didn't say anything, just tightened my grip on the steering wheel. The two-lane road was disappearing beneath a thin white layer. I was driving my old Ford, and the wipers were struggling to keep up. We were in a cellular dead zone, an 80-mile gap between towns where the only thing you could count on was yourself. It happened so fast. It was a sudden jerk. My right rear tire hit a patch of black ice, that clear, deadly ice hiding under the fresh snow. The car spun 90 degrees. I tried to steer into it, but it was too late. The car slid sideways, bounced off the shoulder, and plunged into the ditch. It wasn't a violent crash. It was more like landing on a gigantic, soft pillow. A deep, sudden thump. The car tilted at an odd angle and stopped. The engine coughed a few times and died. Silence rushed in, broken only by the wind howling outside. "You okay?" I asked, my voice thin. "Fine," Mark replied, letting out a ragged breath. "My hand? Just a scrape. You?" "I'm fine." I put the key in the ignition, turned it. Nothing. Just a weak clicking sound. I tried the headlights. They didn't come on. The impact had jarred the battery loose, or worse. We were stuck. We waited. We talked for a while, mostly about the stupidity of trying to cross the pass in a storm. But as the cold began to seep in through the car doors, the conversation dwindled. The temperature outside was dropping fast. I could see my breath. 2 hours passed. Not a single car went by. The road was rarely used in winter, and with the storm now, it was deserted. "We can't just sit here," Mark said. He was always the impatient one, always had to be doing something. "We'll freeze to death." "We should stay in the car," I argued. "It's the best shelter. Someone will come through, a snowplow." "No one's coming," Mark shook his head. "Not until morning. I'm pretty sure I saw a sign for a ranger station a few miles back, maybe 5-6 miles. "Mark, you can't walk in this storm. You can't even see the road." "It's better than sitting here waiting to die," we argued. I tried to stop him. I told him it was a terrible idea, that we should huddle together for warmth, that we had half a bag of cookies and a bottle of water. But Mark had made up his mind. He pulled his hood up, wrapped his scarf tight. "I'm going to climb up to the road," he said. "I'll head east. I'll find that station and call for help. I'll come back." He opened the car door. Wind and snow swirled into the cabin, making me shiver. "Mark, don't." I tried one last time. He looked at me, his face nearly obscured. "Stay put. Stay warm." Then he closed the door. I watched him struggle to climb the snowy embankment back up to the pavement. He stood there for a second, a dark silhouette in the white chaos, then turned and started walking. He faded away. Within 30 seconds, he was completely gone, swallowed by the storm. It was the last time I saw him alive. I waited. I don't know how long. I curled up in the driver's seat, trying to tuck my hands into my jacket. The cold was merciless. It wasn't just outside. It seeped inward, numbing my fingers, then my feet. My thoughts began to slow. I drifted into a hazy, semi-conscious state. I dreamed. I dreamed I was home, warm, and Mark was laughing, telling me I was a fool for worrying. I jolted awake to the flashing of an orange light and the roar of an engine. My car door was wrenched open. A large man in orange overalls was looking down at me. "Hey, kid, you lucid?" It was the snowplow driver. It was nearly 4 a.m. I had been in that car for nearly 8 hours. I was rescued. I had severe hypothermia, but I was alive. When I was coherent enough to talk in the hospital, I told Sheriff Graves everything. He was a quiet, sun-leathered man who had seen everything a small Wyoming county could throw at him. They mounted a search as soon as the storm broke. They found my car still in the ditch. They found Mark's footprints. They led from the car up to the road. They headed east, just like he'd said. They stretched for about 1/4 of a mile, and then they vanished. They simply stopped as if he'd been lifted off the face of the earth. "Looks like someone picked him up," Sheriff Graves told me a few days later. He was sitting by my hospital bed. Someone. Who would be driving in that storm? Just my speculation, he shrugged. Our best theory is a truck driver saw him and gave him a ride. We put out an alert, but no one's come forward. The search continued for a week. Nothing. No Mark. No leads. The official conclusion came 2 weeks later. Mark Barrows, 23, was missing. The unspoken but mutually understood assumption was that he had perished in the storm. Winter set in, the snow fell heavy, the pass was closed, the search was suspended until spring. I lived through that winter in a fog of guilt. I should have stopped him. I should have gone with him. I should have driven more carefully. Every day I looked at my phone expecting a call. The call never came. April arrived. The snow began to melt. Patches of brown and gray earth started to show on the hillsides. I got the call one Tuesday morning. It was the sheriff's office. A road maintenance crew clearing the ditches in preparation for spring had found something. They had found a body. I drove out there. I don't know why. I just felt like I had to. The place looked so different. No snow, just mud and dead grass. My car had been towed away months ago, but the deep gouge in the embankment was still there. Sheriff Graves was standing by the road, looking down. The body was found less than 10 yards from the car's indentation. It had been buried under the heavy snowpack all winter, and only now had it emerged. It was Mark. The initial police conclusion formed immediately. Mark left the car. In the whiteout, he became disoriented. He walked along the ditch instead of climbing to the road. He stumbled. He collapsed from exhaustion or hypothermia, just yards from me. I had survived while he froze to death right near me that night, and I never knew. I attended the funeral. The case seemed closed. A tragic accident, a cautionary tale about the dangers of a Wyoming winter. Then, 2 weeks later, Sheriff Graves called me into his office. He looked tired. He didn't look at me when I walked in. He just pushed a folder across the desk. "Final forensic report," he said, his voice gravelly. I read it. The cause of death was not hypothermia. Mark had died of blunt force trauma, multiple broken ribs, a shattered pelvis, severe head trauma. Injuries, the report stated, consistent with being struck by a moving vehicle traveling at high speed. I read the line again. "I don't understand," I said. "Keep reading," Graves said. I read the next section. Lung analysis. No water from the ditch. Mark had not drowned in the meltwater. His lungs were dry. And then the final section. Soil and fiber analysis. The mud and synthetic fibers found on Mark's clothing did not match the ditch where he was found. They matched asphalt pavement and tire fragments found on Highway 130. I looked up, but Graves wouldn't meet my eye. He was staring out the window. "Here's what happened," he said, his voice flat. "Mark left your car. He climbed onto the road and started walking, just like you said." He paused, took a breath, and then another car hit him, probably a truck. Someone trying to punch through the storm, driving too fast. They hit him and killed him instantly. Silence filled the room. "But why? Why was he in the ditch?" "Because the driver panicked," Graves said, finally turning to face me. "They committed a hit and run. They got out of their car, and in the storm, they saw something. They saw your car, stuck in the ditch. They saw a perfect cover." "They did it," Graves continued. "The son of a bitch lifted Mark's body. They dragged him from the road, and they tossed him into the ditch right next to your wrecked car to make it look like he was part of your accident. They used you to hide their crime." I stood there, stunned. The sheriff was right. The footprints vanished, not because Mark was picked up. They vanished because that was where he was struck. That was where he died. I realized the final truth, a truth colder than the November storm. While I was sitting in that car, shivering with the cold, cursing Mark for leaving me, waiting for him to come back, his body was lying just feet away, hidden by the falling snow and by a vicious, calculated act of a total stranger. Richard's mansion sat on the tip of a small private island, separated from the mainland by a narrow strait and a wooden bridge. I was there for the company's annual party. I was the newest hire, the youngest person in the room, and I'd spent the entire evening trying to impress. The party wound down. The wine had flowed freely, and Richard, my boss, had drunk more than anyone. He was the kind of man whose wealth and power had eroded all boundaries. He exuded an energy that drew people in, but also made them fear him. Near 2 a.m., when the last of the guests had departed, it was just him and me. "Let me drive you to your hotel," Richard said, reaching for the keys to his luxury car from a porcelain bowl on the table. His voice was slightly slurred. "That's not necessary, sir," I quickly said. "I can call a cab." Richard laughed, a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Nonsense. No cab is coming here this hour." I have to get to the mainland anyway. Come on. It wasn't an offer. It was a command. To refuse a man like Richard, even when he was clearly drunk, was professional suicide. I reluctantly nodded and followed him out. The night air was damp and salty. I got into the passenger seat. The expensive leather interior smelled of old cigar smoke and high-end cologne. The engine purred smoothly. We drove along the single-lane dirt track that led away from the mansion. The road was narrow, unlit, and wound along the water's edge. To my right, only a few feet away, was the dark strait. The faint moonlight reflected a glassy sheen off the still water. Richard was driving too fast, recklessly fast. The tires crunched gravel as we flew through the darkness, the headlights sweeping only a short distance ahead. He was talking. He was talking about some merger, how he'd outmaneuvered a rival. He took one hand off the wheel to gesticulate. They never saw it coming, he chuckled, turning to look at me. His eyes were no longer focused on the road. Richard, I said, my voice tighter than I intended, the bridge. Ahead was the wooden bridge. It was old, narrow, and had no guardrails. It was just planks stretching across the 30-yard wide strait. I know this road like the back of my hand, he dismissed, still looking at me. I looked back at the road. We were hurtling toward the bridge too quickly, and we were drifting to the right. Richard, look out. He turned back, but it was too late. He swerved violently, but the right side wheels slipped off the edge of the bridge. There was no screech of brakes, only a sudden, sickening drop, a second of weightlessness. Then came a violent impact. The car slammed into the water. My head hit the dashboard. Everything went black. Then the cold hit. Icy water poured in from every seam. It streamed through the door crevices, bubbling up from the floor. I panicked. I was still dazed. The only sound was the gurgling of water, the groaning of metal. Damn it, I heard Richard curse beside me. The water was up to my knees in seconds. I yelled, fumbling for the door latch. I pulled. I pushed. The door wouldn't budge. The water pressure was holding it fast. My seatbelt was cutting into my chest, holding me to the sinking seat. Richard, help me, I screamed. My door is jammed. The water was up to my chest. The car was sinking fast, nose first. The faint glow of the dashboard was still on, casting an eerie blue light on Richard's face. He wasn't panicking. He acted with an almost inhuman calm. He didn't look at me. He calmly unbuckled his seatbelt. He hit the electric window button on his side. A faint whine, and the glass began to descend. Water surged in. My door. It's stuck, I shrieked, clawing around, trying to find my window button. I pressed it. Nothing. The power on my side was dead. The water was up to my neck. I tilted my head back, desperately breathing in the small pocket of air against the roof. Richard had opened his window. He started to squeeze through. Richard, don't leave me, I sobbed, sheer terror overriding reason. I grabbed the sleeve of his jacket. He stopped. He turned back. In the dying blue light of the car, he looked at me. It wasn't a look of panic. It wasn't a look of remorse. It was calculation. He saw me, trapped. He saw my jammed window. He knew that to help me, he would have to stay, possibly drown with me. He looked at me for one long, agonizing second. Then he violently yanked his arm free from my grip. The pull was hard and decisive. He squeezed out of the window and disappeared into the black water. I was left alone. The moment he left, the car tilted onto its side and the last pocket of air vanished. I was submerged in darkness and cold water. Completely. A primal panic exploded in me. I was still pinned by the seatbelt. I was drowning. My lungs screamed. I wrenched at the seatbelt clasp. It wouldn't open. I pulled again, with every ounce of strength, my fingernails scraping the plastic lock. It clicked free. I was loose from the seat, but I was still trapped in the metal coffin. The car was now fully resting on its side in the mud. I was disoriented. Which way was up? Which way was down? Only darkness, pressure, and bone-aching cold. The air in my lungs was running out. Spots began to dance before my eyes. Richard's window. The thought flashed like a single spark of hope. I didn't try my door again. I dove down, fumbling in the darkness of the car. My hand hit the steering wheel, then the dashboard. I followed it toward the driver's side. My body was numb. Every movement was slow, like a nightmare. I found it. The open window frame, a narrow, rectangular escape. I tried to breathe in. Water flooded my mouth and nose, a painful, wrenching spasm. I drove my body toward the opening with the last of my strength. I squeezed my head and shoulders through, but my hips were stuck. The window frame was too narrow. I was wedged half in, half out. Sheer terror. I was going to die here, pinned in the window, feet from the air. I stopped thinking. I just acted. I kicked my feet against the car's interior, against anything I could find purchase on. I twisted my body. My flesh scraped against the metal edge. I felt a sharp pain in my hip, but it was distant compared to the fire raging in my lungs, and then I popped free. I was out. I swam up toward the faint moonlight, a distant sheen above. My limbs were heavy, my clothes dragging me down. It seemed to take an eternity. My head had breached the surface. I sucked air in. The sound was horrible, a gasping, choking rasp. The cold air burned my lungs. I vomited up salty, muddy river water. I was alive. I treaded water, shaking uncontrollably. My soaking clothes felt like lead. I looked around. The shore was about 15 yards away, and on the bank I saw a figure standing. It was Richard. He wasn't moving. He just stood there, dripping wet, watching me. He was watching me, who had just escaped the grave he had left me in. He didn't call my name. He didn't offer a hand. I began to swim toward the bank. Every stroke was a supreme effort. My body was numb from the cold. As I neared the shore, I couldn't swim anymore. I crawled. I pulled myself up onto the muddy bank, dragging my exhausted body out of the water. I collapsed, coughing and shivering. When I looked up, he was gone. He had left. Disappeared into the darkness of the island, back to the safety of his mansion. I lay there alone on the cold, muddy bank. The car and the evidence of his intoxication lay at the bottom of the strait, and I, the only witness, had been meant to die with it. I realized the truth. This was not an accident. This was a hit and run. And then when he saw me trapped, it became something else. It had become attempted murder. I survived. But as I lay there shaking, I knew Richard had swum away. Not out of panic, but because he knew my death would solve all his problems. And I knew that somehow my fight had just begun. The next morning, when I was airlifted to the mainland by a rescue helicopter, the police were there to do their job. But from the moment the inspector spoke his first sentence, I understood. Richard had called them first. Mr. Richard reported that the car lost control and went into the water. He said, "You managed to get out yourself. He's very worried about you." I stiffened. Richard had framed the situation as an accident, and all the evidence most dangerous to him, the blood, the alcohol, the speed, and his drunken words, was at the bottom of the strait. But his true motive was much bigger. Richard was preparing a major merger, a merger that involved insider trading. The night before, when he was drunk, he had carelessly boasted. They never saw it coming. He thought it was a harmless brag, but I realized. The documents I had recently processed had inconsistent figures. The emails he told me to delete immediately because of a formatting error actually contained unusual information. And at the party, he kept mentioning the rivals who would never investigate. He was drunk and said too much. He saw me, a new, young, easily dismissed employee, suddenly become someone who knew too much. As the car plunged, he had realized it. No need to kill me with his own hands. Just let me drown, and it all becomes an accident. I told the truth. No one believed me. The doctor said I was panicked, hypothermic, and could have misremembered. The police said Richard was an important figure with high credibility. Richard showed up at the hospital, feigning concern, playing the benefactor. But when no one was looking, he stood close to me and whispered, "You were lucky to escape. Once." The highway stretched before me like a ribbon of ink dissolving into the horizon. I was somewhere in Utah, or maybe just past the Nevada border, where the red sandstone of the day had turned into massive, ambiguous shapes in the dark. It was past midnight. It was just me and the steady drone of the old sedan's engine. Then the engine's drone wasn't steady anymore. It started with a hiccup, a moment of hesitation in the acceleration. I frowned, pressing gently on the gas pedal. The car responded with a metallic clatter, then a weak whine. The dashboard lights flickered erratically before dying entirely, plunging me into near absolute darkness. The engine went silent. The car coasted in eerie silence, slowing until it finally rolled to a stop on the gravel shoulder. I sat there. The silence was heavy, broken only by the hiss of the desert winds sliding past the frame. I turned the key. Nothing. Again, just a dry click. I reached for my phone. No service. I had expected that. Around me, the desert stretched for hundreds of miles in every direction, an empty ocean of blackness. I wasn't afraid of the dark, but I was afraid of this isolation. I was stranded. I waited. Nearly an hour passed. 2 semi-trucks had rumbled past in the opposite lane, heading east, moving too fast to notice me. I started to feel the cold seeping in through the glass. Then, a pair of headlights appeared in my rearview mirror, coming up in my lane. They slowed down. I held my breath. An older, dark, well-maintained pickup truck slowly pulled over to the shoulder about 20 yards ahead of my car. Its brake lights cast a ghostly red glow over the empty highway. A man got out. In the dim moonlight, I could tell he was middle-aged, wearing jeans and a button-up shirt. He didn't rush. He stood next to his door for a moment, hands on his hips. "Need some help," he called out, his voice clear in the still air. He didn't come any closer. I cracked my window down slightly. "My car just died. I think it's broken." He nodded, slowly approaching, but keeping a respectful distance from my window. "Mind if I take a look?" He had a pleasant smile. He looked like a rancher or a construction worker. Trustworthy. I pulled the hood latch from inside. He walked around to the front and lifted it. I stepped out of the car, keeping my keys clutched in my jacket pocket, standing a few steps away from him. The desert night cold hit immediately. He took a small flashlight from his pocket and shined it on the engine. After a few minutes of silence, he sighed. "Looks like your fuel pump gave out. You're not going anywhere on this tonight." My stomach tightened. "How far is the nearest gas station?" "About 20 miles up the road," he said, gently closing the hood. "Beaver Creek exit. I'm heading that way myself. I can give you a ride if you'd like." I looked at him, then at his dark pickup. I looked at the empty highway behind me. Cold logic fought primal caution. He seemed to read my thoughts. "Safer than staying out here alone in the dark, ma'am. No one's coming through here until morning." He was right. Logic won. "All right. Thank you." I grabbed my wallet and phone, locking the doors of my dead car. It felt strange to abandon it there. He walked around and opened the passenger side door for me. "After you," he said. I climbed into the cab. It was surprisingly clean. No trash, none of the usual grime of a working truck. It smelled faintly of something like pine cleaner. He walked around, got into the driver's seat, and started the engine. The truck idled smoothly. We merged onto the highway. "Going far?" he asked, his eyes straight ahead. "To California, visiting family." "That's good," he said. "I'm just driving deliveries in state. Boring work, but it pays the bills." The conversation was sporadic. He didn't seem overly curious, which relaxed me a little. I glanced around the cab. The dash was clean, no personal photos, nothing personal at all. Then I looked down at my door handle. My heart skipped a beat. It was there, but the plastic latch part on the inside, the part you pulled to open the door from the inside, was missing. Just an empty, recessed hole. I quickly glanced at his door. His handle was intact. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my breathing even. Maybe it was just broken. Old truck. I put my hand on the electric window. It worked. I could jump out if I had to. I told myself that. "The desert is a strange place at night," he said suddenly, breaking the silence. His voice was still even, almost reflective. "An easy place to disappear. Do you know how many people wander off on these back roads and are never found? They just vanish." I didn't answer. I stared straight ahead. People think the city is dangerous, but out here, there's no one to hear you scream. Nothing but miles of empty land. A chill ran down my spine. The light from the dash illuminated the floorboard. Something glittering caught my eye, half stuck beneath the rubber floor mat on his side. It was an earring, a tiny silver hoop, the kind a young woman would wear. I looked back at the road. A green sign materialized in the headlights. "Beaver Creek exit. Gas station, 5 miles." Relief flooded me. So intense I almost trembled. Only 5 more miles. We passed the sign. The truck maintained its speed. I waited. 4 miles. 3 miles. The exit was coming up. He didn't signal. He didn't move to the right lane. "The exit is right there," I said, trying to keep my voice level. He didn't respond. He glanced at me, just a quick flicker of his eyes. The friendly smile from before was completely gone, replaced by an empty, expressionless look. The truck barreled straight past the exit. The faint neon lights of the gas station flashed to our right and disappeared behind us. "We just passed it," I said, my voice a little higher. "Why didn't you turn?" He held the silence for another few seconds. The road ahead was black again. "I think we'll go to the next one," he said, his voice no longer gentle. It was cold and final. "It's a better station." Panic surged into my throat, the broken door, the earring, him driving past the station. I had willingly walked into a trap. I had to get out. Now, I suddenly brought both my hands to my stomach and let out a strangled moan. "Stop," I gasped, trying to make the sound one of extreme pain. "Stop the car. I think I'm going to be sick." I doubled over, making wrenching sounds. I saw him flinch. The change was immediate. His empty face turned to anger. "Don't you dare. Don't you get my truck dirty." "I can't help it," I hissed. "Stop." The thought of his clean truck being soiled seemed to override whatever plan he had. With a grunt of a curse, he slammed on the brakes. The truck lurched, sliding onto the gravel shoulder, and came to an abrupt stop. The instant the truck was nearly stationary, I acted. I didn't waste time with my broken door. I lunged across the space between the seats, scrambling over him. I pushed hard against his chest with my feet for leverage, my hands fumbling for the driver's side door handle. He roared, a sound of furious surprise. He tried to grab me, but my kick pushed him against his window. I pulled the latch. The door flew open. I tumbled out, not a controlled jump, but a chaotic fall. I hit the gravel shoulder hard. Pain shot through my elbow and knees as the sharp stones tore through my jeans. I heard the other side of the truck door slam shut, heavy footsteps on the gravel. I didn't look back. I scrambled to my feet. Ignoring the pain, I ran. I didn't run on the road where his headlights could easily find me. I ran into the darkness of the desert, plunging into the dry brush and jagged rocks. I heard him shout something, but the wind snatched the words away. The roar of the truck's engine revved. I glanced over my shoulder. He was turning the truck around, a reckless U-turn across the highway. His headlights swept the desert like a lighthouse beam, a searching white shaft. I ducked low, running in a zigzag, trying to keep the large bushes between me and the road. My heart felt like it was trying to beat its way out of my chest. I ran parallel to the highway, running back toward the gas station, toward the faint neon glow I could see in the distance. The truck slowed, crawling down the road, its headlights continuing to sweep the blackness. He was searching for me. I hid behind a large boulder, trying to catch my breath. The truck stopped. The door opened. He stepped out, standing in his own headlights, a dark silhouette. He stared out into the desert, right in my direction. I held my breath. He stood there, motionless, for what felt like an eternity. Then he turned, got back into the truck, and drove away, accelerating fast and vanishing into the night we had just come from. I waited another 10 minutes, shivering in the cold, before daring to move. I limped, keeping close to the shadows, until I reached the perimeter of the gas station's light. It was blindingly bright. 2 big rigs were parked at the pumps. A family was stepping out of an SUV. The normalcy of the scene made me burst into tears. I stumbled into the convenience store. The attendant took one look at me, at the blood on my knees and elbows, and rushed to the phone. When the police arrived, I told them everything. They checked my disabled car. It was still there, untouched. They searched for the truck based on my description, but found nothing. It was as if he and his clean truck had dissolved into the desert. I sat in the store, drinking a cup of water the attendant gave me. I looked out at the dark highway where he had disappeared. I had survived. But that polite smile, and the way it vanished, would follow me on every dark road I would ever take. The clock on my car's dashboard had just flipped to 2 a.m. It was only its faint blue glow and the 2 strips of headlight cutting through the thick black night. I had been driving for 11 hours, stopping only once. My spine was numb, and my eyes were starting to blur with fatigue. The highway was nearly empty, an occasional truck rushing past in the opposite lane like a giant sleeping beast. Then the gas gauge needle nudged the red line. I swore under my breath. A knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. I knew I couldn't push it. The next road sign materialized in the headlights. Gas station next exit, 24HR self-serve. It was the only option. I slowed down, driving off the highway onto a short access road that led to the station. It stood isolated, an island of cold fluorescent light in a sea of darkness. There was no convenience store, just 4 automatic pumps and a small dark glass cashier booth. Not a soul in sight. I parked next to the nearest pump. The air outside was so quiet I could hear my engine tick itself cool. The wind whistled softly through the gas station canopy. I got out, the night cold immediately seeping into my jacket. I pulled out my wallet, slipped my credit card into the reader. The pump started working, a solitary mechanical sound. I leaned against the side of my car, looking out at the dark road I had just left. A sense of being watched suddenly rose, a primal reflex. I spun my head around. Nothing. Just the other pumps, silent under the white light. I pulled the nozzle out of the tank, screwed the cap back on. As I turned to hang the nozzle back on the pump, a searing pain erupted at the back of my skull. My knees buckled. The cold concrete pavement pressed against my cheek. I didn't get a chance to scream. Everything went blurry, but I was still conscious, drifting in a haze of pain. A rough hand flipped me over. I saw only a gigantic black shape blocking the fluorescent light. He didn't say anything. I felt him rummage through my pockets, taking my car keys and phone. He dragged me. My heels scraped across the coarse ground. I heard the latch of my own car trunk pop open. He easily lifted me and threw me inside. My head hit the metal wall. Before I could even orient myself, the lid slammed shut. Absolute darkness. Panic hit like a wall. I couldn't breathe. The air was thick, suffocating, smelling of old car carpet, gasoline, and damp mildew. I pushed against the lid above me, but it was solid rock. I hammered my fists against it. The sound was weak and hopeless. I heard the driver's door open, then slam shut. The seat sank under his weight. The key went into the ignition. The engine roared to life. The car started moving. I was thrown to the side as the car made a sharp turn out of the gas station. Tires squealed on the asphalt. I tried to curl up, keeping myself from rolling around. My body ached and the back of my neck was swelling. I had to calm down. Screaming was useless. Panic would kill me faster than him. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the external darkness to focus on the darkness inside. I focused on my remaining senses. The ride was smooth, the tire noise steady. We were on pavement. I felt the car turn left, then right, then left again. He was taking side streets, probably to avoid the highway. Then the car accelerated. The wind noise outside got louder. The engine settled. We were back on the highway, or a major road. The car drove straight for a long time. I don't know how long. 15 minutes. Half an hour. Time lost all meaning in that metal box. Then I felt the change. The car slowed down. It turned off the smooth road. Everything started to bounce. The sound of the tires changed. No longer the smooth hiss on asphalt. Now it was the crunch of gravel and the tires crushing dry branches. The car rocked violently. I was thrown from side to side, having to use my hands and feet to brace myself. We were on a trail, an unmaintained dirt road. The chilling fear returned. No one drives onto a road like this at 3 a.m. with good intentions. I had to do something. I started feeling around in the dark. My hand hit a carpet mat. I pulled it away. Beneath was the cold metal floor and a small recess. The spare tire. I fumbled around the tire. My fingers brushed against a canvas bag. The jack kit. I nervously opened the zipper. Metal clanked. I found a small wrench, a screwdriver. I gripped them tight. The screwdriver had a plastic handle, a sharp, flat head. I gripped it in my right hand, the wrench in my left. They were pathetic weapons, but they were all I had. I tried to find the emergency trunk release latch. I knew many cars had one, a handle that glowed in the dark. I ran my fingers along the inner lip of the trunk lid, searching for a lever, a cord, anything. Nothing. Just smooth, cold metal. The car suddenly stopped. The engine died. Silence fell. Even more terrifying than the engine noise. I didn't hear any other traffic. Just the sound of the wind blowing through the trees I guessed were all around. The chirping of insects. I held my breath, lying still, my heart pounding in my chest. The driver's door opened. A small, dry creak of the hinge. Then footsteps. They were slow, heavy, the crunch of gravel under the soles of his shoes. He was walking around to the back of the car, step by step, slow like a ritual. He stopped right behind the trunk. I could feel his presence, just a thin layer of metal away. The silence stretched. He was standing there, waiting. Then I heard the keys, the sound of metal going into the lock right above my head. I coiled up, my right hand clenching the screwdriver, bringing it up to my chest. I pressed myself into the farthest corner of the trunk. The lock clicked open. The trunk lid burst open. Blinding light flooded in. I squinted. It was the light from my own car's headlights. He had turned them on, shining directly onto a dense wall of trees ahead, and that light was reflecting back, illuminating the trunk. A huge black shape stood there, blocking the light. I couldn't see his face, just a silhouette, immense and threatening. He stood there for a second, looking at me, an animal cornered in the dark. Then he bent down. An arm reached in to grab me. The moment his fingers touched my jacket, I acted. I put all my strength into it, lunged forward and slammed the screwdriver into whatever I could reach. It hit his arm. A sound tore out of him. A growl, painful and furious. He reflexively pulled his hand back. That was all I needed. I shoved my foot hard into his chest. The kick wasn't strong, but it threw him off balance. I used my left hand, the one holding the wrench, swinging it wildly toward him. I scrambled out of the trunk. I fell onto the gravel ground, sharp stones cutting into my palms. I looked up. We were in a clearing, surrounded by woods. The car's headlights swept across a pile of rusted metal junk to the side. A junkyard. A perfect place to make someone disappear. He was clutching his arm. I didn't think. I scrambled to my feet, and I ran. I ran toward the darkness, into the woods, out of the spotlight of the headlights. I heard him curse behind me. Heavy footsteps started the chase. Branches whipped my face. Roots nearly tripped me. My lungs burned. But I didn't stop. I ran, blindly plunging into the darkness, running for my life. His footsteps were still there, right behind me, relentless and heavy. I just kept running. His sounds of pursuit, the angry growls, and the crushing of branches under his shoes were quickly drowned out by my own ragged breathing. My lungs felt like fire. I didn't dare look back. That would be wasting a precious second. Low branches whipped my face, leaving stinging trails. Roots snaked up like traps in the darkness. I tripped, my knee hitting the damp earth and decaying leaves hard. I fell flat, the taste of dirt filling my mouth. I lay still, holding my breath, listening past the frantic drumming of my heart in my ears. The footsteps had stopped. An absolute silence enveloped the woods. He was stationary, too. He was listening. Or maybe he had given up. Or a worse thought invaded me. Maybe he was heading back to the car. Back to my car, where the engine and the headlights were. He could drive out onto the main road, cut off my escape. He could hunt me down like a wounded animal. The thought forced me up. I crawled, slowly, trying not to make a sound. The pain from the screwdriver stab must have slowed him down, but I didn't know for how long. I wasn't running anymore. Now I moved deliberately, forcing myself through the dense thickets, trying to get as far as possible from the junkyard. Every rustle of leaves under my feet sounded like a shout in the night. After a while, the trees began to thin out. The air felt less suffocating. I saw a faint line, an open space ahead. Pavement. I had run in an arc and somehow come back to the main road, probably a few hundred yards from the junkyard turnoff. I stood in the roadside shadows, shaking uncontrollably. The adrenaline started to drain, leaving me with cold pain and exhaustion. A pair of headlights appeared in the distance, growing larger. A semi-truck. What should I do? Hide in the bushes, or step out? If it was him, somehow he got back to the car and drove around. No, it couldn't be. My car was a sedan. This one was too big. I had to risk it. I couldn't stay here. As the truck neared, I stepped onto the shoulder, raising my trembling arm. I waved. The truck roared, the brakes hissing. It slowed, then stopped a few yards from me. Its headlights illuminated me, turning me into a small, frantic animal, frozen in place. I almost had to shield my eyes. The passenger window lowered. A middle-aged man wearing a cap looked down at me. His face was a mixture of exhaustion and skepticism. "You all right, son?" His voice was gruff. I don't remember what I said. I think I just repeated the word, "help." I stumbled to his door. He unlocked it. I scrambled into the cab. The smell of old coffee, cigarettes, and diesel was overwhelming. It was the safest smell I had ever encountered. "My car? I was attacked," I stammered. The driver didn't ask many questions. He looked at the scratches on my face, my dirtied clothes. He grabbed his phone, handed it to me. "Call 911. I'll take you to the next town." I called. My voice was shaky, breaking as I tried to explain to the dispatcher what had happened. The gas station. The trunk. The junkyard. We met the police at another gas station, a bright and busy one, 20 miles down the road. I sat in the patrol car, wrapped in a coarse wool blanket. I told the story again. 2 officers listened, one older, one younger. The older one scribbled notes in a small pad, his face emotionless under the neon lights. They asked me about the car. I gave them my license plate number. Old junkyard, the older officer said, not to me, but to his partner. About a mile off the main road, Wilson's place. The younger partner looked at him. You think it's... I don't think anything, the older one cut him off. He turned to me. Can you show us that turnoff? It would be helpful if you came along. I didn't want to. The thought of returning to that dark road made my stomach twist. But I nodded. I sat in the back of the patrol car. A mesh barrier separated me from the front seat. I felt caged again. We drove back to that dark stretch of highway. I was silent, looking out the window. Here, I said, as we approached the turnoff. The patrol car turned onto the dirt road. Its headlights were stronger than mine, cutting through the woods. We drove in slowly. And there it was, my car, an unnervingly familiar shape in the darkness. The trunk lid still gaped open like a silently screaming mouth. The two officers got out, drawing their guns. They swept their flashlights around. You stay in the car, the older one commanded. I watched them approach my vehicle. They found the screwdriver I had dropped, lying on the ground, stained with something dark. They shined their lights on small drips of blood on the gravel, leading from the trunk to the edge of the woods. Check the trailer, the older officer ordered. My heart pounded. I hadn't noticed it before. Behind the pile of rusted metal junk hidden in the shadows was a dilapidated old trailer. The two officers moved toward it. They separated, pressing themselves against the sides. I heard them shout, "Police, step outside! Hands up!" A long silence. Then the trailer door burst open. A figure stumbled out. It was him. Even from this distance in the flickering flashlight beams, I recognized the immense physique. He was clutching his injured arm, blood soaking through his shirt. He was blinded by the light. He didn't resist. He just stood there. As they cuffed him and led him toward the patrol car, he looked toward me. He stopped, turning his head. His face was contorted in the flashing red and blue lights. He stared at me through the car window. An empty, cold gaze, devoid of regret or fear. They pushed him into another patrol car that had just arrived. Afterward, they told me I was lucky, that the junkyard was full of things that didn't belong there. Wallets, sneakers, a few pieces of jewelry, personal items that didn't match the scrap metal surrounding them. My car was just the latest addition. I survived. Technically, I did everything right. I fought, I ran, I called the police, he was caught. The story ends there, but it doesn't really end. I went home a few days later, after the paperwork was done, but my apartment didn't feel like home anymore. I checked the locks 3 times. I can't sleep without a light on. I don't drive at night anymore. Months have passed, and I still don't drive after the sun goes down. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the quiet, when I close my eyes, I can still smell the gasoline and the old car carpet, and I see the absolute darkness right before the trunk lid slammed shut.